Geopolitically, we in a field that's for Israel. Wonder, is it real? Rappers acting say they high, say they sippin' pills. Glorify suicide so they get the deals. Big pharma set it up, had to flip the pills. Control the music industry until the scripts get filled. Geopolitically, yeah, we in a field that's for Israel. Wonder, is it real? Took the way you saw the world, then distorted it. Now you think you wanna rock that twirl somewhere orbiting. Theories disproportionate, the truth distorted quick with a forceful grip. They force them as simple that we absorbing quick. Took the people's signature to mean extorted it. They forging it. If news anchors informants who informing them, there's a surplus, but they tell us there are shortages. Credit economy mortgages, dollar that's supported with empty fortresses. But what's important is this: we courting ships, important gifts. Of course it is what extortion is in accordance with an assortment list of foreign tricks we ignoring, which informing this, informing this. It looked like we were snoring tricked. Pedophilia and the government endorsing it. Yeah, eugenics is exactly what abortion is. You just vilify those insubordinate. Way to matrix engineer, that's unfortunate. Geopolitically, we in a field that's for Israel. Wonder, is it real? Rappers actors say they high, say they sip with pills. Glorify suicide so they get the deals. Big pharma set it up just to flip the pills. Control the music industry until the scripts get filled. Geopolitically, yeah, we in a field that's for Israel. Wonder, is it real?
In a world. All right, how's it going? Sorry, it streamed to a separate stream for some reason, but all right, cool. So tonight I have a special guest, Mr. Jonathon Gross, my homie, and yeah, I think it should be a good show. So I know it's been a little bit, so we've been here. You guys can give me feedback on the audio. We'll level it all out. And yeah, I think that's about it. Share the stream. All right, I'm just gonna go ahead and without further ado, bring on my brother. How's it going, bro?
Hey, it's nice to see you, Austin. Thank you for having me. Finally.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for coming on, man.
My pleasure. Yeah, we've known each other for almost 2 years, I think. I want to say.
Yeah.
No, maybe longer than 2 years. Like
Trying to think, it's been a while.
Yeah, since Mount Rushmore. So.
Yeah, I was trying to think back exactly how that all went down, because someone was in the comments of that other video was like, oh, Austin talked about how he talked to him during the Mount Rushmore thing, but he defended himself in the Mount Rushmore thing. So he's lying. There's not a real attorney or something.
First of all, I'm going to say you did an excellent job defending yourself in the Mount Rushmore thing. I could not represent you because to be in federal court in South Dakota, you need to be barred in the state of South Dakota. I am barred in New York, New Jersey, Maryland, and Texas, and federal courts in, you ready? The District of Washington, D.C., the District of New Jersey, the Southern District of New York, the Eastern District of New York, the Northern District of New York, the District of Maryland, the Northern District of Ohio, East, West, South, and Pro Hoc Vice in the Northern District of Texas, Western District of Michigan. I can go on. I'm definitely an attorney. I just want to be clear about that. So, yeah, but not in South Dakota.
That's crazy that it's like that. That for federal court, it's still all these separate areas.
There are 90, I think 97 districts. 97. I'm probably in, I want to say 15 of them. I have a case in the Middle District of Florida, I should mention, and that is with our friend Justin Harvey. I filed that lawsuit.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I was there for that debacle. That was crazy.
That was nuts. Yeah, I mean that's they really violated your First Amendment rights, in my opinion. And I've done a lot of these town hall cases, as you know, because you were singing out. I'm not doing this to brag. We'll talk about why I'm explaining my bona fides. But you gave me some really good shout outs on that Discord, I guess. So why don't you tee up the story just so we can
okay. All right, so obviously most of you guys know about the whole Antarctica trip thing, the final experiment, maybe the not so final expedition, better termed. And everyone's been waiting on me to say yes or no. Then I received a contract, I guess over a couple weeks ago now. And as soon as I got it,
I can tell you exactly because I know the date that you sent it to me. So you sent me that contract. Give me 1 second, scrolling through. On August 28th.
There you go. There you go. So over 2 weeks ago. And so as soon as I got the contract sent to me, I looked at it for a second and then just immediately hit up my boy Jonathan, because he's my attorney. And I sent him the contract. We looked at it. We discussed it. We went back and forth. He didn't like the contract, and I mean, it was extra. The contract was super extra. But anyway, this is the funny part. Okay, so I guess on X a little later, someone was like, Austin, yes or no? Yes or no? And I'm like, well, I wouldn't have even known what I was saying yes or no to until a few days ago. The first time I was sent a contract and I said, my attorney and I are looking over the contract. We're discussing it now. And there are some things that we would probably need to change. And McToon started running this narrative that I was lying about that. I was just looking for an excuse to not go. And I made up that I had an attorney or that I was talking to one. And then he offered to pay my attorney 5 hours for his hourly rate to basically call my bluff. He was that confident I was lying about it. And so that's kind of the context. I didn't even know that was a thing. He randomly popped in on Discord and started telling me about it. That's all. I mean, I originally thought he was saying, tell your attorney I'll pay him 5 hours, meaning that he would hire you for him or something. And so I said, I don't think he's probably going to want to work with you. So I misunderstood. He was saying he would pay for the 5 hours you had helped me. So yeah, anyway, he called the bluff. And we can get into some of the details, but he made a video. I'll show it. I don't want to listen to any of it. It's super lame, but this is the video. Did I catch Witsit lying again? This is like an 8-minute video of him basically saying that I'm lying about having an attorney. Read the comments. They're hilarious. So anyway, long story short, he told me to get the invoice from my attorney sent to his email, and he would pay for it. So we did that. I did that, the official invoice from my boy Jonathan, and McToon immediately shifted the goalpost and said that he needed it physically mailed to him or whatever. So
I sent it to him this afternoon. I sent it to the address that he gave us, and rather somebody's got to pay me. I'm just saying. So, so if he wants to be the one, then we'll take it. I don't know. We'll find out if he's good for it. I mean,
it's so fun. It's so wild. I called Jonathan. This is what's so funny is this side of it is all just so funny while they're being so crazy. I called Jonathan. I told him that and he was like, what? He was so confused. I'm like, I know these people are insane. This guy's insane.
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you hire an attorney to look at a contract? I mean, that's
yeah. The funniest part of it is that if I wanted to say no to this whole trip, I would have just said no. There would be no looking at contracts or I think it's maybe going to be pretty cool if it actually happened to see what happens. But So yeah, and then obviously we don't have to give it too much room. But so I asked Jonathan, I'm like, dude, I don't care if you do or do not feed into this, because I think it's so lame. And he's like, no, man, no, screw that. So you emailed it, then mailed it to him, and he's gone quiet. He stopped responding to me. So
I mean, that was I'm thinking that there's probably also no 24-hour sun is my guess.
Oh, and one thing I want to say too, because I saw a comment. I called you a constitutional attorney, and someone was like, "Constitutional attorney? There's no such thing." When Witsit says that, he's talking about some sovereign citizen think they're an attorney thing. Do you want to kind of tell everyone what a constitutional attorney is?
Well, I'm a constitutional attorney. I represent Austin. You gave me a nice shout out about. I do have the honor of serving a lot of, I think, free speech warriors, including flat earthers. I just want to say it's crazy that flat earth people need constitutional attorneys, meaning people who claim that there's time travel they're not censored. They're not, but people who say that the earth is flat, for some reason, the government does not like that. And what it means to be a constitutional attorney is that, and this is for everybody out there, you should know that we have this thing called the Constitution, and the Constitution has this thing called the Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights are your rights against the government. The Constitution protects you against the government. That's what it's meant for. So if you park in a handicap spot, you broke a law, the government can give you a ticket. But if they violate one of your constitutional rights that belong to you, then you can give them a ticket. And you can hire an attorney who knows the Constitution, who understands how it works, and then you sue the government. And if you win, even if they only nominally violated your rights, like kicked you out of a town hall meeting and they say there are no damages, it doesn't matter. They have to, according to 42 USC 1988, that's a section of federal law, they have to pay your attorney's fees if you're the prevailing party. So I represent, I'll give a shout out to Alex Stein, for instance. He's the town hall terror. He goes to, town hall meetings and says things that the government doesn't like. They throw him out. And sometimes recently they just kind of beat him up a little bit in New York. I don't know if you see that video, but sometimes they just throw him out. Or Justin, for instance, Justin Harvey, he went and he started talking about how Space Coast,
Canaveral.
Cape Canaveral, they should be looking at the Challenger. The doppelganger thing is weird, and then they threw him out because they don't want to hear it. So that's a violation of his constitutional rights. That's our opinion, and we'll see what the court says. But that's what a constitutional lawyer does. So I do free speech. I do search and seizure. If the cops come and take all your equipment or something like that without a warrant, then we can sue them. That's the Fourth Amendment. We do Fifth Amendment, 14th Amendment, different kinds of things. There are constitutional attorneys.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, and shout out to you, man, for doing that. Because I will say, when I had the Rushmore thing, I started looking into a bunch of free speech cases, and I'm like, bro, this is overwhelming. It consumed my life for like 2.5, 3 straight weeks. Like literally every waking moment consumed my life. Just reading through those Supreme Court rulings, trying to understand it all and how it's built up and stuff like that, and then formulate like a coherent point or argument.
And you did great. I just want to say you did a great job. I read your briefs and they were phenomenal. You wrote those before I came onto the case. I never came onto the case, but before we met. And you really did a great job. I will say that.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Okay, cool. And so I do think I didn't even think about the Justin Harvey thing, but that's so crazy. For those who don't know, you may have seen the video, but Justin and I went to a city council meeting in Cape Canaveral County, whatever it is, I don't remember. And I got to speak, and they didn't cut me off. And mine was
you didn't say anything that they didn't like. Justin really spoke to the guts of it, and they did not like what he had to say. And frankly, they made it so that it's very scary to to speak there now. That's what we call chilling the First Amendment exercise. They, the whole point is that governments are supposed to err on the side of the First Amendment and make sure that there's a lot of room for discussion and diversity of opinion. And they failed, in my opinion, in Brevard County, and we're going to hold them accountable for it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely. And I tried to keep it timid so that he'd get to go. So yeah, it's great. This is a real problem. It's a real problem in the United States, man, because when I was in the national parks, they were putting me in little corners where no one could hear me. I'm like, that on its face is not what the Constitution is about. I have the right to be heard by my target audience. You don't get to say, well, you can speak in the woods when no one's there. And so we have free speech zones that people don't realize are, and people don't care about stuff like this right now. Maybe with like the whole pandemic thing, people realize that while speaking up is very important, our ability to speak up is important because we were being censored. But people don't realize that we're going to turn around. And if we ever need to like truly congregate, assemble, and then have our voice heard, we're not gonna be able to. Because they're gonna have changed the whole system around us. Universities have free speech zones. National parks have free speech zones. So yeah, it's
I'm going to say that the cases that you cited in your briefs from Mount Rushmore, those are all the seminal First Amendment cases that really came of age in like the 1940s, the kind of earlier half of the 20th century. But today they're chipping away in the at our freedom. Those days it was a bastion of freedom. They were expanding free speech. Today we're contracting it. And what you're saying is 100% right. They are taking away our First Amendment. And I'll tell you, whenever I tell older, I'm a gray-haired, sagely guy, but there are old lawyers who are older than me. And when I say to them, I do First Amendment, they say, how do you make a living? And I'm like, you cannot believe it. Like, my phone is ringing off the friggin' hook. It's crazy because unfortunately people are getting, I can't take all the business that comes my way because it's just such a shame that this is happening.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. It's crazy. And shout out to the people that actually need you, because at least it means they did something, right? They did something.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's why they've gotten away with it. No one does anything,
Exactly. That's exactly right. And that's why I went into this. I mean, ultimately, I actually quit my job to pursue freedom and to fight for people. I was working for like kind of just mainstream litigation firms. And I tell people this all the time is that my wife and I, we keep Shabbos. You've joined us for Shabbos, and we were sitting around the table. The kids had gone to bed, and we were just praying. And it was in 2022, and I'm very passionate, of course, about the January 6th defendants and how they're arresting these peaceful protesters and throwing them away in jail for months and years for nothing. And it's so obvious. It's such a travesty of justice, in my opinion. And we just turned our eyes to our Father in heaven. And I said, why isn't anybody doing anything? And my wife said, you have to do something. And she encouraged me to quit my job. So I started, I didn't know any January 6ers. So I said, okay, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to fight for civil rights for people. And Flat Earth was one of the first things that I wanted to fight for. I made a list. That's how I met you. I made a list of some Flat Earth influencers, and I said if they ever need me, I really, I want to help them out because it's ridiculous that they would. Why would the government care if it wasn't, if there wasn't threatening to them? So I did that, and then Alex Stein, I got him as a client, which was very good, and he introduced me to a bunch of people. And then I started meeting J6ers, and now I represent many, many J6ers. For your audience, if they don't know about January 6th, it's first they came for these guys, then they're going to come for the rest of us. And if we don't say something, then there's going to be nobody to speak for us when they come for us. It's such a travesty. They're arresting people every day. They're my last count, it's 1,491 people. That's more than a person a day since January 6, 2021. And we're coming on 4 years. And the people that they're arresting are old people, kids. I mean, like 20-year-olds with their whole lives ahead of them, ruining their lives forever. It's horrifying what's going on.
Yeah, that's crazy too, because even with my audience, they're probably so disillusioned with politics. And And rightfully so, maybe, right? Because politics is just political theater, and all sides sell us out. That they probably don't realize the magnitude of what you're talking about. I think that almost no one even knows that. No one knows, and I only know some. I do know some, though. I know even content creators that have been affected by it, where they started looking into people just what they said on the internet, like what they said on the internet the day of the election and the results, and if they were upset, frustrated, they were being interrogated, and some people were arrested. Owen Schroyer, these people got in trouble for talking about this, and you're right. This is such a crazy precedent to set because ostensibly it's you're not allowed to express frustration to your government, and we will go at you and arrest you and ruin your life if you do. Not and just clarify for the crowd here. I think they think that everyone that got arrested on January 6th violently broke into. Now my audience doesn't think this, right? But that's the narrative, is that they violently broke into the Capitol building. You want to shed some light on that?
I just want to say, I don't sit around and say, oh, some of them were good, some of this, that. You have to remember the context. May, June, July 2020, the government showed us what they thought they gave us an idea of what is permissible, as they allowed cities, every person here lives near a city that burned during that spring and summer. And those people were allowed to do whatever they wanted. And we were told peaceful protest, even though we saw in the video people standing around while government buildings burned, police stations burned, small businesses burned. And they said that's acceptable protest. And I don't want to get into the day of January 6th. I recommend you have a guy named Dave Summerall on your show. Dave Summerall is my teacher. In this, he's, first of all, he's a God-fearing man. He's the most wonderful person you'll ever meet. He's in Texas, and he knows the day of J6 better than any person. He could give you a whole presentation on what happened that day. But who cares? You know what I mean? We know that it was a little scuffle that got out of hand. They say, oh, these police officers, it was like 9/11 and the Holocaust all put together. But I mean, it wasn't. It wasn't even one day of it was a 3 to 4 hour riot that occurred only in some areas. By the way, some areas people didn't see, police and protesters didn't see anything. They people walked through this and that. They were regular God-fearing, law-abiding people. And then you had this one area in the Western Tunnel that from like 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock or 4:30 there was like some real scuffle that you could argue was completely the police's fault. But I don't even want to argue that. Who cares? It happened, and it should have been, they arrest some they could have arrested the real perpetrators or whatever, and that's it. Everybody else could have gone home. Why are they going after peaceful protesters 4 years later? Who cares? If you saw how much, what I see, the resources that are spent on rounding up these people, they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars. I fight these cases hard, and they hate me for it because I keep these prosecutors up at night, and they have to work hard to respond to all of my motions and everything. We lose every motion, but I don't care. I'm gonna fight to the fullest extent of the law, because I'm not gonna let my clients, and I only take clients if they want to plea, and whatever I say, please do that with a public defender or somebody else, because they don't like me, you'll get a better deal. But I take clients that say I'm innocent and I want you to fight to the death. And I do that. And I believe that because my clients have chosen to fight, we have probably saved people, because we've tied up the government that they can't get other people. And that's totally allowed. By the way, in this country, just so you know, you get punished for opting for your constitutional right to go to trial, because the federal government says, if you don't go to trial and you take a plea deal, then we'll give you sentence X. But oh my gosh, God help you, if you decide to take your constitutional right and go to trial, and a trial by jury, and you waste all the court's time and everything like that, then we're gonna slam you. And that happens. But my clients say I'm innocent. I want to go to a jury. I don't care that it's a DC jury that probably doesn't like me. I'm happy to fight for them, because I think that it's a great injustice.
Yeah, man. It's just so crazy because you make a good point, right? Where there literal cities burned down. This is actually a testament to how strong the media is because everyone hears J6 and everyone still remembers it. It's still a thing to everyone. Why? Because the media set aside that event and they constantly looped it. We just got desensitized to entire cities burning down. Like literally, it was just another city burned down, and obviously most of us were like, this is insane and these people should be arrested. They're burning down our cities. And then we just forgot about it, right? We just moved on. But J6, where you have people that have a legitimate concern that they're trying to go out and peacefully protest, no, we just have it beat down our throat. It was a threat to democracy and da 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 da. So that's why everyone knows it. And so that's very blatantly political prosecution, right? I mean, that is super
Yeah,
dangerous.
in this country, the law as it stands today is that prosecutors have absolute discretion to choose who they want to prosecute and who they don't. There's no law that holds them accountable as the stands today. And I have argued that I've written this in court papers to the judges, that cannot be the law in a free country. You cannot call yourself a free country if the prosecutors, who are the arm of the executive branch, which is one vote. The president is in charge and everything flows from the president. All those three-letter agencies, the IRS, the FBI, the CIA, the DEA, the ATF, they all flow from the executive branch. So you elect one person, and that's the entire executive branch, which enforces our laws, and they have absolute discretion. They can say, we want to go after these people, we don't want to go after those people, and there's nothing you can do about it. How can that be? But that is.
That's crazy. And that's what I actually really liked. And it's up to you. Maybe if we play the video, or I'll drop the link if you don't want me to. But I watched that video you sent me where I guess you got retweeted by Rep Taylor, right? So you got Rep Green, you got a little bit of views. And what I really liked was that you were discussing like the fundamental way that it's approached because it's all taken for granted. And what you just said is such a good example of that, right? Because if that's the actual problem, the problem is stuff like that, like the fundamental routines that have just been like taken for granted. So like what you just said is ridiculous. And I remember thinking this when I was writing my motion. I'm like, how does this work? Because I'm being charged under a federal regulation that was written, Congress shall make no law, right? Well, Congress didn't make this. The government wrote that, and then they just enforce it forever until someone gets arrested underneath it and then challenges it. And then if they win, then they're able to. So that's not how it's supposed to work, you know? And then if you tack on what you're saying, which is where they just get to pick and choose who they're going to prosecute, which is somewhat confusing though, because there's no way that every prosecutor is like a leftist, right? Like there's no way that literally.
Yes, there is. I want you to know something is that we do have what's called a deep state, the bureaucratic state. They warned about this years ago. If you go into a Justice Department office in the reddest of red states and you see who are the prosecutors working in that office, I guarantee you they're all leftists. What is leftist? I don't go with this left or right thing, by the way. There's up and down. There's ultimately there's the people on top, and then there's the rest of us who are on the bottom, and that's how it works. And we are split into groups of people who sympathize with up and people who sympathize with down. And they call themselves liberals. How dare they call themselves liberals? They're totalitarians. Right. They want to take all of our freedoms away. They want censorship. They want big tech, big pharma, big government. They want like everything, and they get to call themselves liberal. And then people like me and you and Alex Stein who just want to talk and and diversity of opinion. We don't want government coming and taking us away with guns and things like that. But we're considered right-wing extremists. It doesn't make any sense. I was talking with somebody about this. And somebody said, "Oh, they're very right-wing on guns." So I said, "They're very conservative when it comes to guns." I said, "Oh, so they what did I say? I say, oh, so they want to take everybody's guns away? They don't want anybody to have guns? No, they're conservative about it. Oh, so they want to like increase the laws and regulate our guns a lot? Like that's conservative. Liberals want freedom. So if you're liberal on gun control, that means that you do not want the government to control guns." It's like, no. Like that's how the media has framed these arguments.
Yeah, that's such a great point, actually. Like the idea of liberal is actually not bad. Now, you can obviously have pretty deep and profound philosophical discussions as to like say scriptures, for example. It says the monarchy is the best way, a just king in a monarchy. But then you get into all the specifics of like if you have a liberal type of approach, and that's what's kind of separated America. The word liberal doesn't. The people calling themselves liberal are, like you said, antithetical to liberty, which is funny. But
Exactly.
this is what I mean by the left right, obviously, is that the people that were burning down the because basically what has happened is just to use these labels for intended purposes, quote unquote left are the people that are going to go along with a totalitarian government that is clearly the federal government's bigger than it's ever been, more powerful than it's ever been. It's going to keep building. So that's the modern left. Then you have the side who dare speak up against it. You have a whole spectrum of people, and because even the conservatives and the modern right, they still like they want to start wars and they want to still chip away your rights, right? Let's just be real. Across all the board, everyone's chipping at their rights. But what's crazy is that this side that's just blatantly and overtly demanding totalitarianism, they're burning cities down. But then this other side that's like, wait, we don't think this was a free and fair election. They had frustrations. First election ever that it gets paused. You wake up in the morning and it just all changes or whatever, right? So they had a reason to be frustrated, especially with the over big tech censorship of major stories that could have changed the election, right? That's now admitted that it was legitimate. All these things play into. Well, that's what I mean, right? Obviously, the government wants to allow one side of the spectrum, right, to kind of run wild, and it's because obviously they want to give up all their rights, right? They're for more and more control.
Well,
So yeah,
I'll
I guess
tell you.
you're right about it. It's just up and down. It's up and down, and it's framed in this left and right, but really the up and down spans across both quote unquote sides for sure.
Exactly. And part of what the ups want to do to the downs is to divide us. And, I want to say two things. First of all, what you talked about, they call it anarcho-tyranny, where they make it that the people that they sanction, they have total anarchy. And for them, it's, everything goes. And they sanction that kind of violence and destruction. And then we have tyranny, that even peaceful protesters, then they clamp down on you and will track you down 4 years later and, blow out your front door, and throw flashbangs in your house and take you off to jail. So that's one of the what we live in basically is anarcho-tyranny. And I guess the other thing I wanted to mention was that they want to divide us. So they give us these stupid issues like transgenders and, abortion. And, you see like 70-year-old ladies like, oh, abortion, if it's the most important issue to me, it's ridiculous. But what we need is for us to be unified in our love and fear of God's name. And we want them to be divided because they're not unified. They are cartels. And the best thing for us is when there's cartel on cartel violence. When there's two groups, they're not one unified group. There are a whole bunch of different cartels who are fighting with each other, and it's very difficult to understand what those lines are. But you sometimes see when they're slowed down, it's because they are fighting with each other, and that's good for us. We want that. But when we are fighting with each other, then they're able to accelerate their tyranny over us because that's ultimately their shared goal.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I think with my audience, right, people, anytime that any of these topics are discussed, they immediately become kind of disillusioned in a way because they're so just over it, right? They're so over, they feel like they've been played, they have been played, and there's political theater and this, the same players fund both people, and you get the same thing no matter who gets in office, and they're all going to go to war, and they're all going to blah, blah, blah. They're all cool with surveilling us and lying to us and brainwashing us and using the CIA to manipulate us and all of that, right? But it's really a deception. Like you're falling for the trick to completely detach yourself from these discussions because of that. Because
I agree.
Dude, what we're talking about right now is so important, bro. If you don't have free speech, and then of course the right to defend that free speech with your arms, it's over. I don't care what you think about what president, whatever. The reason the government hasn't fully taken over already is because of those two things. It's because we can call out the government, and it's because we can back it up. And so those are automatically important. It doesn't matter what you think about politics, and think about I want to ask you this. So like what you do, isn't it? there's no, like you said, there's no way that what you do is very popular, right? Because it's got to be just like the least, maybe even lucrative route. There's no way that.
I'll tell you right now, I have a case right now that I'm ready to file in South Dakota. It's I think I could talk about it. Actually, I'm happy to talk about it. It's I represent a group called Uncensored America, which is a student-led college organization where they have these groups on campus, and they should bring people like you, Austin. I would love that. So they bring people like controversial speakers to college campuses, and they're allowed to do it, and it's free speech, and the decisions are supposed to be viewpoint neutral. So we have Uncensored America has an event tomorrow on the campus of the University of South Carolina, and they're bringing two controversial comedians, Milo Yiannopoulos and Gavin McInnes, and they're gonna tell jokes. That's what they do. They're comedians, and the event was called, I don't like to say it, I'm a rabbi. It's like, it's a little vulgar. It's called the event, the roast of Kamala Harris, but they spelt Kamala's name, I think, C-U-M, or something like that.
Yeah.
Whatever. Who cares? There have been more vulgar events that have been held on that college campus, and they had a student government meeting because the university allocates basically authorizes the student government to allocate the money, and they were on notice that as long as we fulfilled the funding requirements, we had to get the funding. It was a perfunctory vote. And they got up and they started talking about how they're hateful speakers and misogynists and racist, and they preach hate and blah, blah, blah. And it's all viewpoint, which the Constitution says, no, you have to be viewpoint neutral. And it's a public school. So if they violate your free speech at a public school, then they violate the First Amendment. And while all this was going on, the governor said, I don't like what these guys say, but it's First Amendment. And the Senator, Lindsey Graham, he came on and he said, I don't like what they're saying. They're jerks and whatever, but First Amendment, we err on the side of the First Amendment, because they knew that they had to do it. But the student government said no. They voted, college students, by the way, which makes me so sad.
Yeah.
But they voted against it. So I needed to find a lawyer because South Carolina is like South Dakota, and you have to be barred in the state to use the federal court there. So I needed local counsel to help me file the lawsuit. I called so many lawyers, and I tell them free speech. They're like, oh, it's wonderful, I'm for it. And I say, okay, it's these two speakers. Oh, no, I'm not for it. I'm only for free speech for the people that I like.
Yeah,
I couldn't find a lawyer. I finally found a lawyer. So please, God, we'll be filing soon.
No, I believe you, man. Yeah, that's what I expected to hear. And dude, this is my biggest thing. The reason I spent so much time writing that, they called me with my Mount Rushmore thing. And people all run their mouth. They have such a narrative about that. I refuse to comply. The Constitution doesn't tell me I have to apply. And the Supreme Court's ruled that if there's an unconstitutional free speech law, effectively, that I have the right to disregard it entirely. That's what it says. So that's what I did. And I did get arrested, of course, yeah. But when the reason I spent so much time in trying to write that motion and really like informing myself is because it was very edifying to see the progression of our country, to really go back and dig into the reason that was the first thing that they did was because they couldn't critique the monarch, right? And they had no way to even like call out the tyranny. So they were like, the first thing we have to ensure is that we have the right to call out the government. It's the first thing. And when you listen to how elegantly they explained why it's important, it's crazy how much we've departed from that. And I try to say this all the time, bro. I don't care what you say. We already have laws, right? It's a direct call to violence is illegal. We already have laws. I would say, obviously, talking about any type of sexualization of a minor, illegal. Outside of like very few things, you should be able to say whatever you want to. And dude, I don't think people understand the ramifications of if we lose it. I don't think people realize it. They're so used to being censored.
You've lost it. It's really just a question of whether they come after you. Today, or was it yesterday? There was a clip by a guy named Kaufman. I can't remember his last name. Everybody should look up this clip. That basically the FBI came to this guy's house, and they show up with guns. Two agents with guns and badges, and he pulled out his phone. And he said, what are you doing here? What are your names? And they're like, stop filming. And he said, no, tell me what your names are. Who are you? What are you here for? And they finally said, we're here to talk to you about some social media posts. And he's like, to hell you are. And it's an unbelievable clip. He did very good, but ultimately,
This is like in Europe, though.
No, it happened here. It happened in
No way, bro.
New Hampshire. The guy's name is Kaufman. That's his first name. You could look it up if you want to Google it right now.
Wow,
German.
dude. I just don't. I will say, like, if I don't think that they're able to quite do that right now. I mean, I can see you would say January 6th. Maybe I'm wrong, right? But there are a lot of guns here. There are a lot of guns here. But I guess
I'm advising everybody, if the FBI comes, do not pull out your gun. I'm telling you right now. There is no way to stop the federal government. Don't even think about that. Our only weapon against them is our prayers to our Father in heaven. I'm telling everyone that. That is what will save us from this. When the Israelites were in Egypt, they finally were able to. They called out to God, and God heard their prayers. And then he came to save them in a way that nobody could have predicted. Nobody was sitting around arguing about politics and saying, you know what would be great if a whole bunch of frogs would just come and start attacking the palace or whatever. Like, I'm sure they had a million different plans of how they thought to get out of slavery. That's not what did it. Ultimately, God came and saved them. I firmly believe that is what will happen, and it will only happen when we as a nation turn our eyes towards our Father in heaven. And I believe that, the people I speak to, January 6ers especially, these are exceptionally God-fearing people. And they've told me, by the way, so many of them have said to me, our biggest mistake, I don't regret going there. My big mistake is that I turned my eyes towards Trump, and I should have turned my eyes towards our Father in heaven. And that's true. Now, that doesn't mean everybody listening should vote for Donald Trump. I'm just telling you right now. Just vote for the guy. Who cares? Because whoever was in office, we got to vote for the people who are not in office and keep them fighting around or whatever it is. Vote for. No, I'm serious. Just vote.
That's the first time I've heard that sales pitch.
I don't want to argue with anybody. He's good. He's bad. He's this, that. First of all, he's told us that he'll pardon these people. Please, God. Secondly, I know for a fact that this did not happen when he was president. They weren't rounding up people like this. He's in charge of the executive branch. He wasn't in charge of anything. You know what I mean? He got into office. It was all the same people then. The FBI was surveilling us. The CIA was doing whatever they're doing. The DOJ was, but they all had to lay low because he could effectively put the kibosh on it. So, I'm not saying he's good. I'm just saying he didn't do it. You know what I mean? We didn't have wars when there was other stuff going on. I don't know why. I'm not going to say he's good on your show because I don't know. I don't know anything about the guy. But I just know that when you have one people in office, just vote for the next people. And then when he's in office, then vote for the Democrats next time. And then just keep them on their toes. That's our only chance. Because they're cartels. They're all bad, but at least keep it moving around.
Yeah, interesting take. We would differ here, right? Because I think he's super compromised, but I get what you're saying, and I definitely agree with the major point, which is that the creator is the one that would do it. I think he would call people up to do certain things too, if he had a plan, right? People wouldn't even maybe know a part of it. Interesting part about the Egypt thing, the Egyptians actually wrote about it, like Egyptian scholars, whatever. Like the writer for the king, for example, wrote about these Hebrew people that keep saying this name, this magic word, which is the name of the creator, right? They kept saying this word and they were invoking magic and they were making frogs and crazy weather. And so it's very interesting. Even the Egyptians.
There's a steal of that or something. I've never actually heard that.
Yeah. I'll show it to you. It's very interesting.
I have actually a great book in my library. That is it was written by a guy named A.S. Yehuda, who was he was a polymath who lived in the 1930s, and he grew up in what was then Palestine, Israel, and but he was he actually went in those days. Arabs and Jews actually lived not in peace, but I mean, it wasn't as dangerous as it was today to go back and forth. So he did a lot of chronicling of tribal Arab history, and then he was picked up by the academic community because they saw the kid was a genius. They brought him to Madrid, and he became an Egyptologist with the purpose of disputing the documentary hypothesis, which tries to say that the Bible was written at different time periods. And he studied Egyptian history just so he can show how the language is contemporaneous. So his book is called the language of the Pentateuch in relation to Egyptian whatever. So he goes through all these different Egyptian findings based on the Rosetta Stone. It's a fascinating book.
It is fascinating. Have you ever heard of the documentary Patterns of Evidence? Similar thing. It shows that mainstream Egyptology basically moves around the actual dates and the pharaohs. When you properly take the evidence, it just perfectly corroborates with the scriptures, and mainstream Egyptology lied about
well, I did spend, there was a time in my life where I was obsessed with Egyptian history. And one thing I learned from it is that nobody knows anything, because ultimately, I'll tell you, it's an important cautionary tale. The Greeks came and they kind of like, they dressed up as Egyptians basically. But their Hellenistic culture was, I think, people found it to be just more alluring than the Egyptian culture. And ultimately, Egyptian culture, we've lost that. Or maybe it went underground and it's secret and hiding or something like that. But ultimately, everything that we know about Egypt, from my understanding, is that we've had conjecture based on kind of digging it up after the Greeks had somehow buried it, because there was no oral tradition anymore, because they didn't keep the young people. And I've actually seen the translated steels, those things with the hieroglyphics that were translated. And they say that it was like the older generation calling out to the younger generation and saying, please come to the temples, come to this. We need, to pass this on, or we're going to lose it. And they were not successful, apparently. So I couldn't believe it. I went to see one of these Egyptian exhibits, and I was like, what the heck's going on here? It's all Greek. All the stuff that we have, it's all Greek. And they said, oh, yeah, the Greeks took over. And like a lot of these sarcophaguses and things like that are all Greeks that just like kind of dressed up as Egyptians. It's fascinating. So I don't think anybody really knows what happened with those Egyptians. I read it all, it's all theory.
The Greek and Romans did that with everything.
Yeah.
So they get credit for everything. I don't think they did anything that I think they did just maybe a fraction of what they get credit for. I think that that's what happens. You go and burn everything down, take what you want, and then you can just claim that it's yours. But that's my take.
That's one of the Romans, I think. The Greeks, it sounds like they were really in it. They had some. You know a lot about this. Who am I talking to? But I like Pythagorean and what's his name? These people. What?
Pythagoras, yeah,
they
were weird, man. They're attributed. I'm just saying, like, logic's attributed to them, and like, I don't buy it, because then they turn around and they tell me Aristotle looked at the moon and it looked like a sphere, and he's like, the Earth must be a sphere. Then he looked at a boat and he's like, the Earth.
He didn't do any experiments. He didn't do any experimentation. That's my understanding of Aristotle. Like, he just, it's true. Did they just
his logic? Like, that's not logical, is my point, right? Because it's just illogical. So it just seems like a story. I'm not saying there's nothing to it. I'm just saying I'm highly skeptical. That's all I'm saying.
Look, my belief, I believe in the Bible. And people ask me why I believe in the Bible. I have to say that, by the way. They say, you're so skeptical of everything. Why do you believe in the Bible? I have a story of why I believe in the Bible. It's very simple, because my parents, told it to me. And we have a very, very, very strong tradition. My grandmother, God should bless her, is 97 years old, thank God, right now. And she told me about her grandparents, that she kind of lived with them when she was a very little girl, almost 100 years ago, and she knew her grandparents, and they lived in these rural areas of Europe, where whatever, and they hung to the Bible like it was, and they, for dear life. So, and they passed it down, and they said, we're not going to allow the outside culture to destroy this, and we are going to make sure that we pass this down. They had a very strong and compelling reason to do it, and the reason that they passed it down was because their parents gave it to them. So you could say, oh, well, it was all a hoax that started some time ago. To me, that's a conspiracy. It's more likely to me that the story is true, i.e., that God created the world and he created man with the capability of talking, and he gave him knowledge and wisdom, and much of that knowledge and wisdom was passed down through the generations. And I've never really thought about this so much, but yeah, it's true. Did the Greeks come up with all this stuff, or was it handed down to them and maybe guarded by the elites, and and then they come out and take credit for it? You know what I mean? Who knows?
That's what I think.
But I think that wisdom came from God.
But I will say, so and the strongest evidence for that to me is, for one, they're just, everything that they supposedly came up with is used to deceive us today. But more so, it's like, what happens is the scriptures make a claim, and then mainstream history makes a claim, which are the same ones that make the claim about the Greek,
Yeah.
and then the Bible's right again. So over the course of time, people had to like anthropology and archaeology had to reluctantly just turn to the scriptures, and when they started using the scriptures as a historical document or compilation of documents to actually go find things, they kept finding things, and they kept discovering things that would verify the scriptures. I mean, that Harvard has a Bible college because it's so historically accurate, right? It's not because of a religious motivation. So,
Harvard's theology place is like just a leftist bastion of like.
oh yeah,
deconstructing the.
Can't even get in there for white nowadays. You're screwed.
Yeah, but no, I mean, our Bible is thank God, God has preserved it and kept it guarded, but and we'll continue to do so. So
you think that? I'm curious. You think that? See, because this is how I was looking at it, and I see your point. There's no going at the federal government, et cetera, but the way I was kind of looking at it when I was looking into it, there's such a scarcity of people actually doing it. So, for example, with the CFR regulation I was going up against, it was overturned. It was determined to be constitutionally invalid on its face, right? Facially invalid in like 2010, and that was it. No one challenged it again. It took forever for that to be challenged, and that was a super rare thing. Like as I was looking into it to get some type of precedent, no one does anything. And it appears to me that if people did maybe do something more often, they would win. Like even with the free speech zones on universities, every single time that's been challenged, they've won, and they keep making sure it doesn't get up to the Supreme Court, right? Because then the Supreme Court would have to rule it's obviously unconstitutional to create free speech zones. That is unconstitutional. So they keep it out of the Supreme Court so they can keep on, controlling where people go. But if students said, you know what, I'm not gonna take your offers or whatever, and they just kept fighting it, I don't know. I guess I'm optimistic in that sense. I think that the actual problem is that people are super complacent, desensitized. They don't know anything about this. The younger generation has grown up in a world where, dude, you say what you're allowed to say or you're kicked off. And then we'll find out tomorrow what's the new things that we're not allowed to say, and we won't say those things. So then they just go to play video games or something that doesn't, tread on the thin line of what you're allowed to do. And that's the real problem, in my opinion. And also the other problem is people don't know anything about January 6th, bro. Like people don't know who you're talking about right now. People have no idea. They don't know over 1,000 people anything. They don't know that older ladies or even content creators. They don't know any of that. No one knows anything. They're not going to do anything. And I think that's the problem. I think the problem is the stranglehold of media and the censorship via the big tech, right? Where they have kind of this gray area where they're like a liability, like they're like a publisher and a public square at the same time. You get it. But yeah, I'm curious.
Mm-hmm.
So like, and I'm not to undermine your point, which is obviously that the creator, the father, is the one that's going to actually be able to make the change, right? But I'm curious kind of what your take on that is. Do you think there is a possibility of people kind of waking up and pushing back in the legal way?
Well, I'll tell you, it's interrelated to what I was saying, is that ultimately, I'll start with this. Justice Scalia, who in my opinion was a great man, he was a Supreme Court justice, and he accidentally, when he was sleeping, got smothered with a pillow, totally by accident. And you know how that happens. So anyway, so he was a wonderful man. I have a book that's called, I keep it right near me. Where is it? Here somewhere. It's over there, right in my reach. But it's called Scalia's Court, and it's his more, his best opinions. I have it on Audible. I listen to it all the time. I recommend it. If you can get it, Scalia's Court. You listen to it on Audible. It's so enlightening, very inspiring even. And ultimately, he said something once. He said that what we have, our Constitution, it's just a parchment guarantee. And the Soviet Union had a better Bill of Rights than ours, that offered more freedoms than ours by far. It put us to shame. But because the people there who were in charge of it, it doesn't matter what's written on paper. It's all about the people. If you have a godless people like the Soviet Union, then it doesn't matter what you're promised on parchment. Ultimately, you're going to get nothing. On the other hand, if you have a God-fearing people, you could have you can have Sharia law and you'll live in harmony because because you have God, because part of fearing God is also loving your fellow man and being your brother's keeper. So the reason that what's happening to us today and the apathy that you pointed out is because people are so selfish. That's what it is. I tell people about January 6th. My wife jokes, we only get invited to dinner parties once because, you start with me and then it's like, that's why she told me to start going on podcasts. She says, just stop it. We need a social life. But I'll yell and scream at people and they're like, well, they shouldn't have been there or whatever. And it's just selfishness. They don't care because it's not affecting them yet. But but I'm motivated to do what I do, and I know that you're motivated to do what you do because we love other people and we want to share God's name, which is truth and justice. That's part of God's name. And these college students who, like Gavin McInnes, is telling some jokes about some lady, you know what I mean? Like, who cares? But they have such hatred and fear and anger and jealousy, and their faces are contorted and mean, and they hate us. They don't know us. They hate us. And they want to shut us down. They don't care about fairness or truth or justice. So if that is our culture, if those are our people, then this is going to be the result. On the other hand, if we turn towards God, if we are a brother's keeper, if we do love each other, and we won't pass by other people's suffering without stopping to help them, then that's going to be infectious and it's going to be contagious, and that will also affect the law as well. And we won't need to change any laws. We'll be fine.
Yeah, that's I can't say I disagree with any of that. I think what you just brought up is very interesting, actually, the Soviet Union. And absolutely, this is actually why I talk about cosmology so much, because one of the major parts that you discover is geocentrism. And if the Earth is in the center, who placed it there? And obviously you can prove the creator without cosmology 1,000 ways, even just using natural law. But most people don't know that. And that's what they did in the Soviet Union. They removed the creator because atheism immediately turns into nihilism and apathy. And then it's very easy to take over a nation, right? And like have a slave state because, well, you answered to no one. So the state becomes your God. You really have no internal fortitude. So yeah, that's actually I yield the point entirely. I don't disagree at all. And that is actually somewhat concerning, as this country was specifically founded on Christian ethos, and it is moving away from that. And if it moves away from it, it's over. It is the only reason America, this is my opinion, right? It's the only reason America is what it is. Fundamentally, I mean, and I'm going to trigger some people here, it was actually in strong opposition to the Catholic Church. In fact, like 98% of it was Protestant. It was a very specific group of people where almost half the people that came over here left. They went back because it's a very specific culture and it's a specific ethos, and you actually couldn't even hold office in places. Atheism wasn't allowed. You weren't allowed to run office or anything. And we're so far away from that. I think that people don't realize it. We've taken it for granted. Like the culture it built, we're taking it for granted. And atheism is rising. And that's definitely why we're seeing this. So I guess, yeah, you're absolutely right. The outline is only as beneficial as the people that are upholding it, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm going to say a point. Well, first of all, I got to say that I'm sure that this podcast, coming on a Flat Earthers podcast, is people use it to discredit me in the future or something like that. But I don't care about that at all. Let them do that. I believe in free speech and it's this whole nonsense. If we all just stopped caring, the media, they do all kinds of things to like tell people not to like a certain person, and then we all listen. If we all would just say I don't care anymore, then they would be powerless. But I'll say that when it comes to flat Earth, if anybody is used this video later to discredit me, as a flat earther or whatever, I challenge them to, because this is what happened to my wife and I. We watched we thought it was a joke. We did, you like everyone. We were globalists and everything like that. And then we watched some flat Earth content as a joke. It was level, Eric Dubé, yeah, credit where it's due. and the Hubble brothers, whatever their name is, and
Hibbler.
we what
Hibbler.
Hibbler brothers. We watched it on Earth Day, and I guess what year was that? 2021, 2022, whatever it was.
Yeah,
And
2020. It's been a while. Yeah.
Was it 2020? Was it
I think
May
so.
of 2020?
I think so. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, we heard about it from our mail lady who we always would talk to whenever she would come by, and she would tell us the real news that was going on. And she said that this thing was coming out. So my wife said to me, "Oh, we got to watch this tonight." So we thought it was a joke. We watch it, and I'm not even gonna say that it's a great documentary because it's interesting. It's like it didn't have to be. It just asked questions that were so obvious that for some reason have been suppressed in me. I'm describing every flat earther. And I was like, oh yeah, that's true. Like I stopped asking why we don't feel that we're moving a long time ago. So we said to each other, let's just pretend it's real and be open-minded and think about it. And then we went for a walk at night. It was nighttime. And I looked upstairs at the stars and the moon in a way that I'd never looked at them before. And I said to myself, pretend it's true. Pretend it's the way that, by the way, everyone before Copernicus apparently believed it to be. I said, pretend it's, Maimonides, one of the great Jewish philosophers who lived in the 12th, 13th century. His chapter 3 of his masterpiece work is called the Foundations of the Torah. That's chapter 3, Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah. That's what it is in Hebrew. And he describes the Talmudic model. He says that this is the foundations of the Torah is understanding this model. He writes that. I'll go through it with you one day. And I said, pretend Maimonides is right and pretend all these people before Copernicus were right and just think about it for a minute. I felt closer to God than I had ever felt, I think, in my life. And that feeling has never gone away because you feel God's closeness. You feel that you're a special creation, that God created this world and he's watching it and he's active participant in it. And that was so special to me. I felt it immediately. I knew it to be true. I didn't have to hear any of your amazing science or proofs or anything like that. And people say, oh, well, why would they lie? I said, that's why. It was so obvious to me. And that's, I guess, is that 4 years ago now? I have to look that up. But I just, people who won't open their minds to it are missing out. They should just do a thought experiment. But nobody wants to be a scientist. Whenever I yell, if I'm not yelling about January 6th, my kids know I'm yelling about flat Earth. And and it's the same for everyone. We have these conversations, and the other person sees in 1 minute that they haven't looked into their model for a second, and I actually know their model better than they do. And then. And I just be a scientist. Like Copernicus, who you like, had to think outside. If you admire him, then emulate him. And he thought outside of the mold, according to your history books. So why don't you do that and be a real scientist? And I'm going to say this. Austin, you are a real scientist. It's amazing to watch you. I love your content. I'm so proud to represent you.
Thank you. That's such an awesome testimony and experience. You were right, by the way. Level 2021. You were right.
Okay, 2021.
You're right. Dude, that's so. I will say, my wife said the same thing. You met my wife. That was her experience as well. Was that when she first really thought about it and she started hearing it and it started making sense. She had this moment where she was like, wait, the creator's right there. There's a real creator right there, looking at us. And that's such a special thing that's been taken from people. And so the why question is almost disingenuous.
And when I want to say psychologically for myself, when I'm yelling at people and, trying to get them to open their minds to experiment and think about it, it's because I love them. I don't yell at people that I don't care about. It's because I love them and I want them to have this experience.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Same here. And it's not easy. That's for sure. And this part of it's just a fact. The people that came up with it, came up with these lies. They worship the sun. They had their own weird religious beliefs, and that's just factual, right? No matter what you think, factually, the people that came up with this heliocentric model, they worship the sun, and then the people that started NASA were Satanists, and like, I mean, literally,
Nazis. I
and Satanists.
I really believe this. Honestly, I think that when they were sitting around thinking about it with Werner von Braun and whoever, they were like, what should we call this agency? And one says, why don't we just call it Nazi? And the guy's like, nah, it's too obvious. Let's do NASA. You know, it's like, I really think that's what happened. I have no doubt.
It's very close. And like they were literally like Charles Parsons was literally a Satanist, self-proclaimed. And to me, that's wild. So, you know, when people think we're crazy, if we bring up like, you know, there's something special about this place, and it's definitely worth like stepping back and re-examining it.
Is that me? Yeah, that is me. So sorry about that.
Yeah, it's just crazy where the alternative idea came from. It wasn't scientific at all. It was like, let's make this work and let's flip everything around because we have these occultic beliefs. And almost no one knows that. So that's cool, man. Thank you for sharing that, man.
I heard you talking recently just with Stu Peters. Is that who it was? And, you know, it's just you explaining so well, you know, just this idea that, you know, how does air travel work? You know, how do you catch up with Florida? Like, oh, no, it all moves together with that. It sounds so crazy. I am shocked actually every time that I'm like, oh my gosh, you actually believe in the spinning ball? That's where I am with this thing. I actually am shocked when people, I don't even think they're serious. I just like, you have to be kidding me.
That's fun. And most people just have never thought of it, you know?
Yeah.
And the societal ostracism is so crazy. But
I think I so badly want to bring you, we just haven't had an opportunity yet, but you mentioned it on the Discord that Mashi and I are always talking about bringing you guys out again so we could do like a public lecture, debate anyone, scientists, anything like that. You know, I mean, debates are, you know, it's always a tough one because they don't really want to debate. They just want to dismiss, and they're not actually having a conversation, which is a shame, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I've had some people, man, like fly me out and stuff. There was a bar that went really viral recently in Idaho. He had heterosexual awesomeness month during you know, Gay Pride Month. Yeah, and he had me out there to speak. Super cool guy, Mark Fitzpatrick, very cool. And he couldn't get anyone to come debate me. And he offered $10K. Danny Faulkner, quote unquote Christian astronomer, debunks flat Earth, offered him $10K and pay for all his stuff. And these people just can't. These people will never. They'll never actually come. They'll never do it. Someone needs you, man. But
it's my thing. So you know, somebody's trying to phone. They'll call it on their phone. I look to me. It's just the opposite of where we should be. You know, I mean, they took science away from us and they put it in the hands of this elite. There's a book written by Rupert Sheldrake. Did you ever read that? Science, I think it's called Science Set Free. Is that what it's called?
I don't know.
I have it upstairs.
Wait, say it again. Science what?
Rupert Sheldrake is the guy's name.
I've heard of that guy. Didn't he write about the dogs knowing you're coming home?
Yeah, I think that's his thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So he's a globalist. You know, I mean, he's a scientist or whatever it is. But his book is very interesting, I thought, because he talks about the introduction to the book. He talks about how the church. People are like, oh, the church was so bad. The church wasn't bad. It was the same elites that there are today. But people were more religious back then. So if they wanted to control everybody, they put on some smocks and they pretended to be church. Right? I mean, that's what it is. And then what they did was they didn't like that. They wanted to move people away from the creator. So then they foisted the quote unquote enlightenment on everybody. And then they're like, no, now we're science. And it was the same people. And now they just wear white coats and it's the same thing. So he shows this beautiful progression. And, you know, And that's really what's going on, is that they just like the church that existed before wanted to actually take religion away from the people. My understanding is that they didn't let the people read the Bible. That's a true thing, right? I think that's like the church said, "Oh no, you guys don't read the Bible."
Yeah.
You know, I love the tradition because it's the opposite of that. It was really like literally you teach children. Our Talmud, which is right here. One of these days we'll have another discussion about the Talmud, and every page is questions. And when you learn it in a dynamic form, it's like my boys are learning it. They're in, you know, 3rd and 4th grade, and they're just starting at the most elementary level. Like, challenging is you get points for that. That's the whole point of the exercise. It's an amazing thing. And they present 2 rabbis who have 2 totally different opinions, and they're both claiming to speak what should be the word of God. And the teacher, the rabbi, you know, who's teaching my boys, says to them, "Who do you think is right? And tell me why. And who do you think is right? Why do you think so?" And let the boys fight it out and like use their analytical thinking, and then get them to do the opposite opinion. That's why Jews make good lawyers, I think, is because that's our training. And you know, and what they're doing with this new science thing is exactly the opposite. The science, as taught in school, is here's an experiment. Follow these instructions exactly the way that we tell you. And if you don't do the experiment exactly right, you fail. It's like, how is that an experiment? It's not.
Exactly.
So,
Dude, asking questions has been removed.
It's totally removed.
It's crazy, bro. It's crazy. Yeah, obviously, obviously, the Talmud gets a very bad rap. So I would be interested to hear. To hear like the stillman for some of the points in there, because I'm unfamiliar with it. I obviously hear what people say about it, and I've heard some good counters actually. You know how like with the glow, like meaning there are people who present the Talmud as very, very evil, and when I listen to some people like explain that true context of it, I'm like, oh wait, that guy was wrong. That guy was, and I'm not, you know, I don't have to open up this can of worms here, but I will say that just like how with the globe.
Well, I'll come back. We'll do another one. I'd love to, because but the people who talk about it, they like cherry pick these things from wherever. They have no idea what they're talking about. I mean, I don't even want to get into the polemics of it. You know what I mean? Because it's like, what, you know, there are some people who come on, they're like, no, let me explain what that really means. You can't understand it. The Talmud is not a text. It's an experience. It's 2,711 pages that have been continuously studied since it was compiled in the year like 600. And what goes on in it is that you read the foundational part of it, and then you just argue about it. That's the whole point of it. It's an experience. It doesn't exist as a dynamic text. In fact, when it was first written down in its most primal form, which was the Mishnah, which was in like the year 200 by Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, it was controversial. He was only able to do it because he was so respected, but you weren't allowed to write the Talmud down. The whole point is that it was a multi-generational experience that could only be learned orally, because once you write it down, it becomes ossified, and it had to remain dynamic. So he said, look, we're never, you know, that's wonderful in an ideal form. We're never going to be able to maintain that. So we have to write it down. And then they expanded it like another 200 or 300 years later. And then we remained with that text. And then, but it's like, you don't understand. It's like that you have 2,711 pages. It's a closed universe. So if I'm talking with another person who is seeped in it, you know, the way that I was educated, then we know exactly what we're talking about. We can just go to a page, we can start talking about it, and then it's like it just flows from there. It's off the page. It's just a springboard to discussion, and it leads to everything. I mean, so just to give you an idea, I mean, I'll open up any one of these volumes. So here, just randomly, this is Maseches Shavuos is one of them, and each one's a folio with what do you call it? With 2 sides. So this one is only it's only 49 folios. That's 2 sides, so that's like 98 pages, not even 96 pages, because you know the second one. And then on each page, the text itself is only this part in the middle. The things on the side are commentaries, and then the rest of the book is all just commentary on it. And these are all commentaries. These commentaries are hundreds of years old. This commentary in the back over here, this is the riff. I was just talking to my son about it tonight when I put him to bed. He wrote that. He lived to be 100 years old, and legendary. He was with it till the very end. So he lived in the year 1000. He lived 1,000 years ago. We're still reading his thoughts on this text that we're all reading on. He's just a commentary. And then there's, commentary on his commentary. And then, there's a lot of discussion. So, and that's just the ones that are actually made it into the book. And I have, if I turn the shelf over here, I have all these other commentaries. It's endless. It's totally endless. So people who go into it and they like cherry pick a thing or here, they're totally missing the point.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely don't know much about it. I definitely have heard people say crazy things, like Jewish teachers say crazy interpretations, and I think it would be ignorant to say like that's what it says, because I've talked to other people such as yourself who say completely different things, and it's basically it's a conversation, and it's basically it's to get into the nuances of what isn't specified and to kind of like bring certain ideas up. I definitely have heard people say insane things that claim to be like Jewish rabbis or whatever. Like they've said
some of the things that I've heard people say and make it on memes are totally false. Others are just totally out of context and just misunderstood. But once again, I just want to say it totally misses the point, because it's like they don't even understand what is going on in it. Like I said, there are 2,711 pages, but some of them are studied more than others. So there's a lot of stuff in there that's very obscure that people have never seen. People have studied Talmud their entire life, and there are only 2,711 pages. They've never seen some of those pages. They've only seen 50, 60, 70 pages, which are like the stuff that we talk about, which is my ox scores your ox, and who's liable and how many damages we have to pay for. And they'll know those, or they'll know, some of the more ecclesiastical ones about, for instance, some like the holiday of Rosh Hashanah is coming up. So my boys are learning right now the section that talks about the shofar, what animal it comes from, and, and things like that. So it's like, that's the stuff people know. Then I'll see like Andrew Tate or somebody be like, oh, and it says in Sanhedrin on this and that. He's pronouncing all the words wrong. He doesn't know what the heck he's talking about. No offense, Andrew, if you're listening, which I'm sure you are. But it's you should visit yeshiva, stay there for a month, 2 months, find a good teacher. Everything, like, people will be very nice to you, and then really understand the experience of the Talmud. That's the only way to understand what it is. It cannot be explained. It is an experience.
Well, I'm definitely interested. So similar to like the heliocentric model, I like to be able to stillman every part of it, right? I can do it better than a lot of people that mock those who don't believe in it. I would like to do the same thing with that. I mean, like I said, for example, if you were to take like just randomly pick out people who claim to be Christians and their interpretations of the Bible, you could get some people saying crazy things as well. So I definitely don't dispute that part of it. And so, yeah, I'm pretty reserved on it, but I do think I will say this, and some people might get triggered about this, but I will say, because there's a lot of narratives that are repeated about the Talmud for sure, but I will say, I wonder if some people, so my experience is some people have told me that it's not for me. I'm not allowed to know about it because I'm a goyim. I've had people tell me that on X. I'm interested if people will get triggered if I learn.
I'll tell you the answer to that, by the way. The answer to that, so what happened was, by the way, this happened at the times of King Ptolemy. Have you ever heard of the Septuagint? The Septuagint is the just translation of the Bible into Greek. And by the way, that's a great proof of the Bible. The Talmud talks about, the Talmud tells law, and it also tells stories. It's a very interesting framework. So there's a story about the origin of the Septuagint and how it came about. And the way it came about is that one of the Greek Egyptian kings, he invited a bunch of sages to translate their ancient book. And this happened like in the year, whatever it is, like 200 BC or whatever year that happened in. Might be wrong year, but the idea is that it was already ancient 2,000 years ago. But that said, is that the day that it was translated in Jewish on the Jewish calendar is a fast day. We mourn that day, and the reason is because once they translated it, then all of a sudden we had to start polemicizing it, and it went out to people who just wanted to discredit it. So the Talmud has been translated very well in the last like 30 years. And it's well known that you can get very accessible translations now that didn't exist. So all of a sudden you have all these people who have access to the Talmud, and the problem is that you get bad people who start making stuff up or taking stuff out of context and looking at it with a very I don't want to say critical, like not critical in the way that it's supposed to be looked at, but in a critical light, like just looking to discredit it and make it look stupid or make it look evil. So when the Talmud says that we don't want others to have access to it, it's referring to the Bible, but now it refers to the Talmud also, is we don't want problems. Like we just want to sit and learn this thing. They burned it in France in like the year, like we've been through this before, where the Talmud was considered by the government to be an evil book, and they started burning it. And just leave us alone. We want to learn it in our yeshivas. Come visit the yeshivas. You'll see. I mean, it's an unbelievable thing. We work on character development, and you go to any yeshiva and say, "I'm here to learn." Nobody's going to turn you away. Everybody's going to be, especially a non-Jewish person who comes with an open mind to learn Talmud. They'll embrace you. They'll sit you down. They'll talk about it for as long as you listen to them, because they're proud of it and they love it, and they don't want people to think badly about it. But the people I see on the internet who are just going on and saying how it's it's a horrible, evil book, they're not really interested in learning what it's about. If they were, they would they would go to yeshiva and find out from the people who are learning it.
Yeah, so I've been very reserved about, like, I've been very open about my critique about all groups of power, including like secular American Jews and all groups of people that are basically pillaging our country right now. But I've been very reserved about making claims about the Talmud or Talmud, however you pronounce it, because of this very thing. I've had discussions with various Jewish people, and I've found out that a lot of the talking points that people say about the Talmud are not true. And I'm just not like that. I'm not going to be dishonest and repeat. Like, for example, people say, almost everyone, and I have heard this, read it, repeated it before until I learned about it, that it says that Jesus, Yeshua, is burning in excrement and semen and stuff like this.
Nobody even knows that. I'm just going to say, first of all, it doesn't even say, it's not like it says Jesus, and frankly, I've once again, it's not about that. Like, nobody knows what the historical context or time period of those passages are. And
that's what he told me, was that it's a different Yeshua, that it was a super popular name, and that the verses right before that actually shows you that it's a different one.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
And what if I don't know either. I guess what I'm saying is, the worst thing, say even if you were very critical of it, the worst thing to do is to misrepresent it. It's the same thing about like flat Earth, right? Like if people claim that like flat Earth is so stupid that's their ideological enemy or whatever, well, the worst thing you can do is like lie about our arguments, because then someone comes around, they're like, wait, but that's not actually what they think, and it actually it does the opposite. It has the opposite effect, So I don't gravitate to ever doing that. I think it's just dishonest. And I do the same thing with the globe. Like, I'm not going to lie about what the heliocentric model claims, because then someone can look into it and then see like that's not what it actually claims. You know what I'm saying? Then they may equate it to truth.
You don't have to lie about it. You actually have studied the heliocentric model more than people who claim to believe it. And you don't need to lie about it, because you've seen it, you've seeped yourself in it, you've studied it. The people who are taking potshots at the Talmud, they haven't looked into it. They don't know anything. They come, and by the way, this is all a up-down thing, like we were talking about earlier. This thing I'm hearing a lot. None of these Jews who are doing all these bad things to us, and there are lots of them who claim that they're Jews or are Jewish heritage or ancestry or whatever they want to say. They don't know anything about the Talmud. They've never studied the Talmud. They've never gone to yeshiva, or if they did, they left and they hate it. But I don't even see those kinds of people. The Jews who actually study the Talmud, keep Shabbos the way that you're supposed to, keep kosher the way that you're supposed to, pray 3 times a day, go to synagogue, things like that. Those people are nowhere near the levers of power. I'm telling you that. If there is like 1 or 2 people like, oh, Jared Kushner, okay, great. There's one guy who came from the community, and believe me, my understanding is, I don't know, maybe he's a religious guy. I don't know. I actually went to high school with him, but I'm just saying, like, I don't get a residual check from Mark Zuckerberg for whatever he's doing or stuff like that. He's not interested. He hates the Talmud. He hates Shabbos. He has nothing to do with me or my world or what I do. And and people talk about. I just say one more thing on this. People will be like, "Oh, Israel" and things like that, and then they'll show like a Hasidic Jew. The Hasidic Jews in Israel, from the very foundation of the state, have opposed it. From the very not like a few, all of them have said, no, we're not interested in this. We do not want this Jewish state. It's not Jewish. It's secular atheists. They hate the Torah. They hate us. They want to take away our Torah. They want to take away our heritage. We're opposed to it. They've always been opposed to it. So when you see like the Zionists, and then they'll show a guy with like a black hat, it's totally inaccurate. And everyone knows that.
And I will say that's a very interesting point, but the reason for this, and this is why, like, I am very big proponent of free speech, and I have all kinds of different perspectives, and this has been a very popular subject recently. So I have all these different people on. I have Messianic Jew, some would call him, but he's like converted to Christianity, but raised, studied all the Talmud and all that. I'm trying to get all the different perspectives, but I will say what you're saying is definitely my understanding right now, is that there's a group of people that are opposed, that are quote unquote Jewish, that are opposed to Zionism, and specifically because even in the Talmud it basically says that they shouldn't have it yet until their Messiah comes here. It's basically a punishment that the land was removed from them, and then they wouldn't take it. If you actually look into the history of who founded modern state of Israel, they did not care about Jewish people, man. Like he straight up writes about like sacrificed them to get our land.
They wanted to destroy it. Theodor Herzl, who is considered the father of modern Zionism, was a totally assimilated secular atheist who had nothing to do with his Jewish community or Jewishness, and then decided that after he writes this in his book that's called The Jewish State. You could read this inside, is that he said, we wanted to assimilate and the Christians wouldn't have us. So we needed, therefore, to open up our own place so that we could have our own thing, and I could be the boss, basically.
And he says however many Jews have to die to get it, have to die.
I don't even know about that.
No, he was crazy. He was
his
crazy.
own thing. So once again, I just want to show you one thing. We won't talk about it this time, but hang on one sec. So I've written 4 books, and one of my books was very controversial. It made me unemployable as a congregational rabbi, which I used to be. It's called, I don't know if you can see it, but because of the light, it's called The Jewish Case. The Jewish Case for the One-State Solution. You can find it online. There you go. There you can see it, right? I'm not telling people to buy it. I don't even think it's available. But basically, I came up with that cover. I wrote this book in 2010, and I was a congregational rabbi at the time, and it basically made me unemployable. You see, I came up with this concept here. I'll tell you what it's all about.
You told me a little about this.
I think I did. And I'll talk longer about it, but ultimately, I grew up as a quote unquote Zionist, meaning I just loved Israel. I studied there for 2 years after I graduated high school, as did everyone from my high school class. We all went to Israel. Some stayed for 1 year. I stayed for 2. I dreamed of living there. I still do, maybe one day. The land of Israel, because that's our homeland. That's the land of Abraham and Isaac, and everything happened there. And that's the land of Israel. But that said, is that this government that has always been run by secular atheists, how dare they call themselves a Jewish state? They're the antithesis of a Jewish state. And they just co-opt it for whatever reasons that they do. And it's not doing anybody any favors. And what I say is that if you want to have a peace process, the peace process should be to move to become a democracy for all of its citizens, but with the caveat is that obviously you have to do that slowly. There's security concerns. There are a lot of people who are really angry for justified reasons or not for a long time. So any solution, but the idea that a Jewish state only separates people needlessly. If it was a Jewish state that kept the Torah the way it's supposed to be kept and taught, to love your neighbor and everything like that. It was this utopian Jewish society and everything like that went by the Torah and was governed by sagely people who, wonderful. We don't have that. So it would be better off if we just had a land like America where Jews could practice there. We have a large Jewish community of many millions of people there. And by the way, people would probably be more Jewish, in my opinion, because there's this thing that they say, one of the mitzvot in the Torah that we observe is that we hang a mezuzah on the side of our door. So in Israel, even people who are secular, they do it just because, it's part of the culture. But somebody once said, if there was a law that you had to have a mezuzah, then everyone would pull it down right away, even religious people, because you don't want the government to tell you what to do. So let the government get out of it completely and let the people just turn their eyes to their Father in heaven in the way that they have to. Let the people, the government, build the roads and do whatever they need to do. But don't call it Jewish if it's not. And then all the peace-loving people then can get together. And the people who want to murder other people and who, then we can deal with them separately. Like they shouldn't be part of any state. I don't care what the religion is. If you want to murder people, we don't do that. So Jews or Arabs, like whoever, we don't want murder people. And let's just, so you can't do it tomorrow. Like people are like, oh, that'll never happen. It'll kill us. And blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying do it tomorrow. I'm saying that if you want to move in a new direction, then we should be moving towards a country of shared values and remove the quote unquote Jewishness that's actually fake Jewishness. That's basically the thesis of my book. I haven't spoken about it in a long time, but all of a sudden it's become very. I wrote it, 15 years ago, and
super relevant now.
It's super relevant now.
Super relevant. Yeah, no, I find it interesting. Like I said, I like to house all perspectives, and yours is a very interesting one. And I will say, I say this a lot. Actually, it's the suppression of this conversation that's going to it's going to be the worst thing ever for Jewish people. The worst thing ever is to suppress the conversation, right? For example, the fact that you're talking about it, I can leave this up on YouTube, but if you weren't here and we were talking about this, there's a serious threat to get taken down. So that alone is going to infuriate people.
Like, believe me, Jews who keep Shabbos and study the Talmud are not the ones who are doing that. I don't know what's going on with that, but it's, to me, and I'm a Jewish person, it's super weird. I don't understand that.
Well, it would be racially. So this is where you get into the racially Jewish and the religiously Jewish distinction, where there is a racial in-group preference of people in America. They're 80% secular, 70% secular, or whatever. And that's why people are upset, is they're not even allowed to say the word in some places.
I reject what you're saying. I really do. I think that it's, we talked about up-down earlier. The ups, they want to just infect us with more divisions. And they want to, secular Jews, I'm not talking about the elites, just regular secular Jews. They want nothing more than to just be like everyone else. That's all they want to do. They don't want to stand out. They don't want to be different in any way. And they're somehow injecting this, anti-Semitism, quote unquote, whatever that word even means, just to more divisions. And don't fall into that trap. I'm telling you right now, it's that the people who are suppressing this, they only want divisions. I believe that sincerely. And it's funny.
That's real fast. I just want to make sure, because this is a whole other stream, and I would be very interested in having the conversation. But I guess what I'm saying is, when you say they're not real Jews, you mean they're not like practicing the Torah. They're not. They're basically most of them haven't studied the Torah. They don't live like basically in any type of holy or righteous way. That's what you mean when you say that.
I don't know if I said they're not real Jews. I wouldn't use that terminology, because they might identify as Jews or whatever it is, and I'm not going to say yes, no, or the other thing.
Wait, I hear what you're saying, but I'm saying, okay, are you saying there's a distinction, obviously, between a practicing Jewish person and then one who just identifies strictly based on their ethnicity?
I think it's a terrible thing to identify Judaism based on ethnicity solely. And I know that there are a lot of there are quote unquote Orthodox Jews, which that's what they call people like me.
Yeah.
Orthodox means that there's like one opinion. We are a very thoughtful community in that if you walk into my synagogue down the block or whatever, you're going to get 10,000 different opinions of people. So there's no one opinion here. But so there are some people that are my neighbors and things like that would argue with me, and they say that no, look, if you're ancestrally Jewish, then there's always a hope that you will come back to the ancestry, to the heritage that your grandfather put his life on the line for, and now there's still a hope that maybe that person will come back. That's ultimately what it is. We say that, look, we care about fellow Jews because their grandparents and our grandparents were all sharing the same Torah in rural Europe or whatever, and then all of a sudden Cossacks came and whatever and did all these things. So hopefully their grandchildren will come back. And my wife's parents are like that. My parents both were raised in religious homes, and their parents were religious, and their parents, and we could trace it back many generations. My wife's parents, their great grandparents maybe were religious, and then they lost it, and they independently, both of them, rediscovered their heritage and came back and raised a family. And my wife, you've met her, and she makes a beautiful Shabbos dinner and things like that. So Jews are saying we don't want to give up on a person like that who's only 2-3 generations away from their heritage, when their grandparents are turning over in their graves when they see them. It's not racial in that regard. Look, I'm not going to speak for everyone. Maybe there are such people, but frankly, I've never met them. I really don't. And also,
I've met some, but X is a different world. Like X is where people can say all kinds of crazy stuff, and I give it to you. I will say my opinion here is I would love to have the conversation. I'm not Jewish, right? I would love to have the conversation. I had another Jewish guy on who's converted to Christianity, and he has a different take or whatever, but who knows? And I guess what I will say is, for example, I can say anything I want to about white people right now. I can say white people are basically demons incarnate, that straight white Christian males should all be done away with, and that we should genocide the white race, and and that's fine. I mean, in the sense that I can say it on any platform, in any way, completely fine. And that's the reason to me, the worst thing that can happen right now is the conversation isn't had, because there are people getting very angry about it. And
I agree with you. Let me ask you a question. I'm going to ask you this question. I'll bet you nobody's asked this, but could you say the N-word right now? No, right? You couldn't say that, right?
No, I couldn't say it on
Does
this
anybody
platform.
suspect that it's black people that are enforcing that? Nobody suspects that.
Oh no. But Jewish people Jewish people do own YouTube, right?
No. A Jewish person may own it.
Okay, fair enough.
No, I'm just saying, that guy.
Do you think that might be why we can't say it here? Do you see what I'm saying?
No, I do not. Because he's also the same people. Hear me out on this point, because this is important. The same people who are policing us on saying things about Israel or saying things about Jews are also enforcing us about black people and about immigrants and about cats and dogs.
Not white people.
What? Not white people. I agree. But ironically, those people are white, aren't they?
Well, that's an argument. That's the argument, because some Jewish people will claim to be kind of white until they want to throw me under the bus as white. I agree with that.
But I'm just saying their skin color is white. Is that correct? Another European, whatever it is. So my point is that these people who are doing this are white-skinned people who could be if you lined them up in a lineup and they're not wearing yarmulke, you wouldn't know that they're Jewish per se. So they're white people, and they're not black, they're not Hispanic, they're not immigrant, and they are imposing those things, and Jews. And my point is that it's all part of a scheme just to divide us. They don't care about Jews. They don't care about Israel. All they care about is dividing us. So they today they'll censor Jews, tomorrow they'll censor something else. They just want to divide us into groups. And they love it. They love nothing else than to hear us yelling about this group or that group, and not just looking at each other and seeing the image of God and another person who maybe holds a different religion, who maybe, has different skin color. They don't want that. They want us in tribes. So they create them, and they mess around with us that way. There was a great Twilight Zone episode. Do you ever see the Twilight Zone?
Yeah, it's cool.
There was one episode, it was called, I think, something on Layton Street. So people should look it up, where basically there's this street, and all of a sudden there's something goes on, and all the power goes out, and then all of a sudden only one light goes on in one house. So everybody says, they must be doing it. We're going to hate them. And then theirs goes out and another one goes on. They say, they must be in on it now. And then, and all this division happens in this one street of people that at the beginning love each other. And then at the end, the camera pulls back and you see a bunch of aliens, and they say, see what we did? We got them to point at each other. So we'll just do this on every street, and we'll get them to fight with each other. And that's how we'll take over the world. It's an unbelievable episode. It's called something on Layton Street. I believe that's what it's called. Everybody should watch that episode now if you can find it on YouTube. That's what they're doing. They're trying to get us to turn on each other. I don't care, and neither do you, about anybody's skin color. Nobody does. It's stupid. We're all adults. You know what I mean? They are telling us to do that. I don't care where a person comes from. All the issues. I don't care about a person's religion. I want to have debates and discussions. We all do. There's some people less than others, totalitarians, but they are trying to divide us, and don't fall into the trap.
Sure, nonsense. But I will say a nuance. I will say here, I do think it's important where people come from, in the sense of knowing where you come from. So, example, your identity is very important to you, and you talked about your grandparents and their grandparents, and knowing where you come from and embracing your identity and not being ashamed of it is very important. And there is one group right now who's under attack, and it is white, quote unquote, white people. And I'm not even allowed to be proud of any of my ancestry.
Most marginalized group, no question.
Yeah, so I think that's what I'm saying. I mean, if you look at 7% of the world's population right now, we're 7% and we're plummeting. And all the places that even have a majority are being outbred right now, basically in 30, 40 years. There's a strong probability, actually, that white people will kind of cease to exist as we know it. That's possible in this century. And so I think it's important in that sense, right? I think it is important.
I think what you're saying has to be said. I am a First Amendment lawyer, and what you're saying is the most controversial stuff. You know what I mean? It's the stuff that needs the most protection. Black supremacy does not need protection.
No, you can say whatever you want. You can burn a city and say whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly. That's not an issue. I agree with you 100%. But I'm going to circle back to what I've said, is that ultimately, I'm not discrediting or disagreeing anything that you said. It all is solved when we turn towards God and we see godliness and all of this will end. And the media and the government and big tech and big pharma and everything, all they want to do is take that away from us and divide us. And no, I mean, I agree. It's easy to say if you're not, the one under attack. But the fact is that, I think you and I are on the same page on everything. I don't want to see, white people as marginalized group. That's horrible. I don't want to see any marginalized group. And
actually, the reason that I've been talking so much about the disproportionate Jewish power, and I've been having the conversations, is because I make it very clear that what I think is the worst thing that can possibly happen to Jewish people is that the conversation is so suppressed that you don't get to hear people's perspective like yours. What you hear is just other people speculating about what your perspective is, because they're not allowed to talk about it. And then people get very, very angry, right? And they begin to generalize. This is way more dangerous. It's the same thing with white people. It's that white people are going to get really mad, right? White people are going to get really mad that they can't even talk about how they're white or anything, or about how, look, I love you. The creator made you too, but I want my child to look like me. That's so not taboo or whatever now to say that I want my child to look like me. They're going to get mad. You're in way more danger of dangerous things happen, violent uprisings, basically tribalism that turns into like actual violent movements when you don't allow free speech, when you don't allow the conversations to be had and hear the different perspectives. You see what I'm saying?
Look, I totally agree. And if you look at the those cases that we were talking about at the beginning, the First Amendment cases, a lot of them were inspired by just this idea, this very simple idea that makes sense, is that you want speech. The more people are yelling at each other, the less people are physically fighting with each other. You want they say the opposite now. They're like, oh, we don't want hate speech because hate speech is what keeps us away from violence. I agree with that. I want everybody to talk about everything. I want to be able to yell at them and scream at them. And I don't want the big tech platforms to be suppressing certain views, and not because if people are saying bad things, I want to know what they're saying. I want to be able to argue with them
and know who they are and what they think.
Who they are, know what they think. I mean, 100%. That's why I do what I do. And by the way, I want you to know something. There was a woman in California that she went to a city council meeting, and she started yelling about free Palestine, blah blah blah, whatever it is. And then she was a very passionate young lady, probably maybe 22, 23 years old. And she, right before she sits down, she says, and you people, you haven't passed a resolution to like free Palestine or whatever. And I know where you live, and we're going to come get you. And then she goes and sits down in the crowd. Nobody says a word. Nobody flinches. Nobody anything. And then after a minute, the mayor says, that was a threat. Guards seize her, and the police come and they arrested her, and they charged her with 14 felonies. Okay. Now, this girl, I guarantee you, if she saw my yarmulke, she would call me a genocidal maniac and think that I want to kill all the Arabs and whatever it is, and Palestinians, and blame me for everything. I tried to reach out to her. I was unsuccessful, but I wanted her to know that I would represent her for free, nothing, because she's not a threat, and the mayor knew that. And I don't want to live in a country where you say something that everybody in the world knows is not a threat, and then they charge you for 14 felonies. Nobody wants to live. I'm way more afraid of the mayor than I am of that woman, that girl.
Yeah, that's why I love you, man. That's why I resonate so much with you, because I think that's such a noble, frankly, like very rare type of understanding now. So kudos to you. I think we agree on all of this, right? Like that, it's the suppression of conversation that is the worst thing that you can do. And on
that note, you're my teacher in many ways. I love your keep doing what you're doing, especially the science, man. You got to keep doing that. Whoever you can get on the show, especially the scientists, you've had some really, really good debates. I'm not talking about Professor Dave.
No, if you have any connects, dude, please set up some actual professional.
Yeah, if they do. I want to bring you here and do some live, performances, so that I'll call it a performance, but some lectures, so that people can be educated a little bit and start asking questions, because that's what we need. We need more questioning. And I'll say this: people need to understand J6 and the elections and Trump and all. They beat us because we focus on issues that will ultimately end up in the rear view mirror, and they just move on from it. The Kennedy assassination, what are we going to do? Learn who killed Kennedy, 70 years later, great. But flat earth, the nature of the world that we live, it will never be in the rear view mirror. And that's why I believe that fighting for true science, like you are doing, is the most important fight, because it will never, it's the one that they cannot get away from. So the way that they're going to try and get away from it eventually, when the tides have turned so much, is that they'll co-opt it, and they'll have some person from the New York Times and from Harvard say, oh, guess what? It's all flat and everything like that. And they'll give this person a Nobel Prize. But so what? We don't care about that. The battle is right now. It's an issue that they cannot get away from. And that's why I admire you so much, Austin. So keep it up.
Thank you, man. The respect is mutual, brother. And thank you so much for jumping on. And obviously there's so many topics we could talk a lot about. So we'll have to talk again in the future, man. Do you have You have anything you want to say before you get out? I don't want to make you stay too long. You've almost been here for 2 hours.
Yeah. No, the last thing I'm going to say is a disclaimer on everything here. FBI, DOJ, and everything like that. Have at it. I don't care. What are you going to do to me? I turn my eyes towards my Father in heaven, which is what we all should do. We should just love each other and pray to God, honor and fear His name, and then they can't touch us. They can take all the little things that they think are important. They'll try and take away from us. But the real important thing that we have is our love for one another and our relationship with our Creator. So have at me.
Absolutely. Much love, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Austin. I'll speak to you soon.
All right, guys, that is my boy Jonathon Gross. What a legend! All right, I was gonna end the stream, and then I realized that you guys probably sent in super chats, and then I would just be leaving you guys hanging. So I'll find the super chat. What actually I'm gonna do, and now he's off the stream. He can't stop me. I'm gonna play the clip of him because I think it's so epic. He would be too humble for me to play it, but now he has no say. I get to play it. So I'm gonna play this clip of him that recently went kind of viral. It has a bit of a decent length. I don't know if I'll play the whole thing right now, but I do have to use the bathroom, so it's perfect timing for me. And then I'll drop the link in the chat. Then I'll read the super chats, and then we'll wrap it up. Yeah, and again, McToon basically said that guy didn't exist, and I'm lying about it or whatever. So McToon needs to pay his invoice. So whoever of you are stalking my channel right now on his behalf, I know you're here. Feel free to go tell him to pay his invoice and to keep his promises. All right, I'm gonna pop up the screen here. Here we go. So I want to play this video because I think it's cool, and I think what he says is very cool, and it very parallels a lot with what we were just talking about. But I think it's very cool that we have somebody doing this, and not only we have somebody doing this, but somebody doing this, and he's on our team. I'll be right back afterwards. I got to use the bathroom, so see you in a moment. And let me actually make sure that it's going to. Okay, so it should share the audio. You guys give me feedback and make sure it shares the audio. It should. And be back in a moment. So if I can figure out how to go full screen here. Hey, can you guys tell me in the YouTube chat? I'll check the YouTube chat and make sure that the audio plays.
6 defendants that could happen to any American. And that is why my name is Jonathon Gross, and I'm.
And then I'll also do, oh yeah, no.
A January 6th attorney, and to my knowledge, there are no Black Lives Matter attorneys or Antifa attorneys who are defending peaceful protesters. But if the government was arresting peaceful protesters for Black Lives Matter, I would be a Black Lives Matter attorney. I want to be brief and just mention 3 issues that the American people should know about that are occurring to January 6th defendants that could happen to any American. And that is why January 6th is so important, because it really brings to light some of the problems with our justice system. The first one I want to bring up is that the process is the punishment. The worst example of how the process can destroy a person is the story of 18 USC 1512 C2. It's a statute that imposes a 20-year sentence in prison for, quote, obstructing an official proceeding, whatever that means. This law gave the DOJ the power to charge misdemeanor conduct as a felony that carries with it a punishment of 20 years in jail. One of my clients, an honorably discharged military veteran with a wife and children, never committed a crime in his life, did not enter the Capitol on January 6th, did nothing that would rise to a misdemeanor at worst or above. He was charged with the 1512, convicted by a DC jury, sentenced to 33 months in prison. 3.5 years after January 6th, the Supreme Court held that the 1512 indictments were invalid. So whoops, sorry about that. This man will never get back what was taken from him. He lost his freedom. He lost his job. He lost his money. He lost his reputation.
Nobody will compensate him for that lost time. It can never be given back to him. Nobody can compensate him for the indignity of being a prisoner when you're an innocent man. The havoc that it wreaked on his family, the toll it took on his health, his physical health and his psychological health, if you can imagine, the missed celebrations, the holidays, the funerals, what was taken from him will never be returned. And that is how the process, even if you come out innocent the other side, is the punishment. The second point I want to bring up is the catch-all charges. The 1512 charge was only one of several of the charges that are so broad that they can literally apply to anyone. Hundreds of January 6ers are charged and were charged with 18 USC 231A3, what's called the civil disorder charge, a felony punishable up to 5 years in prison. Now, this is what the statute is. Any act that obstructs, impedes, or interferes with law enforcement during a civil disorder. So that's any act, including the mere presence outside the Capitol, basically can be classified as a felony punishable with 5 years. If the cop says that, well, he did, interfered with me, that's 5 years felony. In 1987, there was a Supreme Court case called City of Houston v. Hill. In that case, strikingly, there was an almost identical law. It was a local ordinance in Houston, and a gay rights activist was arrested for violating that local ordinance, which made it unlawful to, in any manner, oppose, molest, abuse, or interrupt a police officer who's performing his duty. So that case, he was arrested and convicted of it, it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said that's totally unconstitutional. And in the words of Justice Brennan, quote, "The ordinance is violated scores of times daily, but only those individuals chosen by the police in their unguided discretion are arrested." So I and others brought this case, Houston v. Hill, to the attention of the DC District Court and argued that, hey, checkmate, right? It's the same law. So they said, no, it's different, because that law said to oppose, molest, abuse, or interrupt the police. But this law says to obstruct, interfere, or what's the third one? Or impede a police officer. See the difference? Totally different. But so yeah, motion denied. But it doesn't matter, because they're missing the point. The point that the Supreme Court was making is that both of these laws are so broad that law enforcement can charge everyone or nobody with it. So the DOJ has the unguided discretion to essentially make anyone a felon. It's very hard sometimes to even distinguish why a J6 or sometimes just the misdemeanor, sometimes the felony. It seems almost random. I will mention that typically it's based on their social media tweets, and that's going to be most of the evidence in court is a battle of the tweets, and the government is going to cherry pick from thousands of tweets and show. I could tell stories. But that brings to the third point. The third point is prosecutors in this country have absolute discretion. I and other January 6 attorneys have filed many motions asking the courts to dismiss charges based on selective prosecution. But the judges have denied every one of those motions. The law in this country, as it stands, is that prosecutors have absolute discretion to prosecute or not prosecute whomever they want. And that simply cannot be the law in a free country. So we have obvious problems that affect all Americans, and the process is the punishment. We have these vague criminal statutes, and prosecutors have absolute discretion and basically no accountability. So how do we get out of this? Or more specifically, what can Congress do to fix these problems? One thing is to start repealing the thousands of overbroad federal criminal statutes. But I realize that obviously takes a lot of time and is not so simple. But the fact, there's a book by a former prosecutor called 3 Felonies a Day, that you don't have to buy the book. That's what it is. We're all guilty of 3 felonies a day. It's just a question of whether they find those felonies. There's a J6 attorney, a great J6 attorney named Carol Stewart. She recommends a strategy which would be very novel but very interesting if it would become part of our system, is that when the DOJ abuses a statute or when the court gives what is maybe an erroneous interpretation, instead of waiting years for it to get to the Supreme Court to fix it with the right interpretation, and the Supreme Court, obviously, it takes years and years to get there, millions of dollars and years. But Congress perhaps can try passing resolutions on the floor that speak to the meaning of the laws that it passed. And that way, if we had a system like that, then the elected officials can begin to take an active role in interpreting these statutes. So if the Justice Department says that 1512 can apply to a person who is a misdemeanor, Congress can get on the floor, pass a resolution with maybe even 13, 14 members, and say, we say that the statute should be defined this way. We're the ones who we believe that this is what we intended. So I don't know if that would be conclusive, but it would definitely be something new in our system where instead of unelected federal judges making those decisions, it would go back to the people. There are lots of other ideas, and there are lots of attorneys and others who definitely would like to open up this discussion. And this, as I said, this is not unique to January 6th. This affects all Americans. And I want to conclude by saying, in my opinion, though, and we appreciate every single thing that you do, everybody who came here today, but we cannot legislate our way out of this. Justice will only be restored to our nation when we turn our eyes to our Father in heaven. So often, when I tell people about the undeniable injustice against January 6ers, they say, well, they shouldn't have been there. How often do we hear that? These people, they don't dispute that January 6ers are being unfairly punished. They're just not bothered by it because it doesn't affect them yet. They've forgotten the famous poem by Pastor Martin Niemöller. First, they came for one group, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't one of them. Then they came out for another group, and I didn't speak out because I was not one of them. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out. In the book of Genesis, Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery because of envy, anger, and hatred. Years later in Egypt, they found themselves imprisoned, and they said to one another, quote, "We are guilty because we witnessed the suffering of our brother when he pleaded with us, and we did not hear him. That is why this suffering has come upon us." The injustice of January 6th, I've seen it firsthand in the courtroom, looking at the juries. It's fueled by envy, anger, and hatred, and it can be stopped only with repentance, prayer, and kindness. God only asks that we seek him and that we are our brother's keepers. If we do what he asks, he will end this madness. So I thank you all for providing us with this opportunity, and I only ask that you use your platforms as elected officials to direct the eyes of this great nation to our Father in heaven, and pray that he unifies our hearts to love and fear his name, and that he who makes peace in the heavens should make peace.
Oh, I was muted. Shout out to him. What I was saying is that shout out to him because I didn't realize, although I had an idea, because I know some people actually that were personally attacked and investigated and brought in for interrogation and even arrested regarding J6. People like me that it could have easily been me. I wasn't making content talking about it all that much, right? I predicted Trump would win. I said, I don't trust this guy at all. I still don't trust him. And he has some very sketchy connections. And then he didn't. And then obviously I did discuss it to some extent, right? But I was a couple days after, or I wasn't like really talking in the moment of the inauguration. So anyway, long story short, everyone should agree that like that's totally not okay. That is totalitarian, right? So I think it's very epic that he is representing them. All right, cool. I'm gonna run through these super chats and we're gonna wrap it up. I don't want it to be a lot of just me talking afterwards. All right, Alex, thank you for the very generous $100 donation on Ko-fi. Thanks for the response on X, and thanks for the work that you do. Good luck with the Antarctica trip, and best wishes for you and your fam. Thank you so much. And yeah, we'll see what happens with the Antarctica trip. God, I don't even know what I think is going to happen at this point. I think it's interesting. And I saw a video of them flying in Antarctica, and that's what actually made my decision. I saw a video of people flying into Union Glacier, the camp we would be going to. And I was like, bro, that looks so epic. And look, man, I think it's towards the ends of the earth. And I think the scriptures are true. And what a coincidence that these religious Hebrew people back in the day wrote in a book that they would have you believe is not inspired, instead of the winds come from the ends of the earth. And then now we know Antarctica is the windiest place on earth. So I find it very interesting, and I would love to go there, frankly. So I think it's interesting. And I'll talk to you more about all that in another stream. But it's very interesting. And I didn't think it was going to happen because we got that contract, and then I instinctively felt like this was no good. This narrative was being ran that it was just us that wanted the contract. The contract was like 70% demands, and it was purely from his perspective. I talked to Jonathon immediately. We kind of agreed on that. And then we basically said no, that contract got trashed. So anyway, here we are. The contract is as in our favor as could possibly be, and it was agreed on. Which in the contract it says no lies, no deception, nothing's hidden, nothing is known about that we're not being told about. All this, like every verbal agreement, is incorporated into the written contract. All this stuff where it's like, I think it really ensures that it's on the up and up. So it's a very interesting situation. All right, cool. We'll talk about that later. All right, let me come over quick to YouTube. See if we got some super chats. Do you support universal feet pics? No. Where can I find these books on Talmud? That would be a question for him. Good question. I don't know. And what I was trying to say about that is I absolutely see tons of misinformation about the Talmud, man. Absolutely. It's just a fact. There are people that swear up and down they know what it says, and they tell you. For example, there's a part where people say, and I don't even know if I can talk about all this on YouTube, though. That is the actual problem here. Is there's so much censorship around this topic that it is a recipe for disaster, and people are going to get mad. And I'm mad about it because the sixth stream I ever did, I called out how Israel has their fingerprints all over major wars, and I got kicked off of YouTube. Sixth stream I ever did. So I know I empathize with the frustration because I'm also frustrated. But I will say there's a part about like advocating things happening to underage children. That's not what it says. It's actually in an actual context. It's about capital punishment, and should someone be killed for it. And they're having a discussion about the specifics about capital punishment and when it shouldn't apply. So removing that context is dishonest. It's like someone talking about Mickelson Morley and saying, "Oh, it just disproves the ether." It's like, no, that's factually incorrect. You're being dishonest. You're lying by omission and removing context. And so I think that's very important. And look, it's no secret that we disagree theologically, right? Like I think Yeshua was the Messiah. So, all right. Superfluidity of naughtiness. The guest keeps ignoring that those self-same white people that are promulgating cultural division are disproportionately Jewish. MAGA, not MEGA. I don't know what that means. I think he is or isn't ignoring it. I don't think that happened. But okay, thank you for the $5. So yeah. Anyway, and look, you have his position is very clear that he thinks that free speech is extremely important to the point that he'll defend people that he staunchly disagrees with. I think that's admirable. And as much as I don't like Elon Musk and I know that we can't trust him, he does summarize this very, very succinctly and accurately. Free speech is about allowing the person that you don't like to say what you don't like, or the person you hate to say what you hate and disagree with. That's the easiest way to understand free speech. It doesn't matter what someone says. It doesn't matter at all. And like that's why I will platform people that are being censored everywhere else, because there's no way that person should be able to say something that should ruin my life or ruin my day or somehow, like, I just hear people out. I hear people out, and I even like help still man their position to make sure that the audience understands their position, because truth is not fear investigation. And I'm not a fragile little, I'm not like some female, in no disrespect to females, obviously, but like there's no way. Like I sit in a room of like I've sat in rooms on X of like very racist people. It doesn't hurt my feelings. I don't get offended. I used to be in Clubhouse where I was like the only white guy, and black people are gods and white people are the devil and stuff. Like, can't imagine me ever advocating for them not to be allowed to say that. I truly want to know what they think and hear, and why do they think that, and there's always some truth in people's positions. That's why there are entire collectives holding that position. There's always some truth. So anyway, that's my position. I feel like it's the most logically sound position. It's quite frankly not anything you can debate against. It's just a fact. Truth's not fear investigation. So cool. And we won't go too much. Obviously, I have a million things to say about some of the topics that were talked about tonight, and I want to keep this succinct. So we covered the super chats on there. I'll check Rockfin real quick. Oh, we got generous donations on Rockfin. Let me check over here. Archer, awesome interview. Very generous. $100. Thank you so much. And another $100 from Archer. $200 on Rockfin from Archer. Thank you very much for supporting on the free speech platform on Rockfin, and for the crazy generous donations. Archer is always very generous. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I appreciate it so much. I thank you. All right, cool. I'm just gonna wrap up the stream because I wanted to stay with what it was. I will show this on stream real quick just to remind people of partially what prompted tonight's stream, because this is so wildly goofy. I'll pop over here. Did I catch Witsit lying again? And to tell the story again quickly, McToon, they're all running this narrative that I can't go to Antarctica because it'll ruin my grift, and I know the Earth's a globe, and blah blah blah. Obviously, none of that's real. They're like, yes or no? Why are you dragging your feet? He says in this video that I'm dragging my feet. I wasn't dragging my feet. I didn't get the contract until the end of August, and I had to look at it, and it's just way too big of a. There's way too many logistical details to hit me with a contract and expect me to just sign it because you sent it to me. It's not how it works. So I was looking over it, and there were things that are just completely unacceptable from my perspective in there. And the number one thing I talked about the whole time, like media rights, was not in any way to my satisfaction or represented to my satisfaction. So anyway, I answered honestly and said, I'm looking over with my attorney, and he either truly believes and thinks I was lying. I would imagine so, since he offered to pay. I don't know. And that just shows you he's truly convinced himself that I'm like this really deceptive person that's grifting and lying all the time or whatever. And his whole audience believes it. I don't know if he believes it or he placates to them or whatever. So McToon's running the narrative that I didn't actually have an attorney. I used it as an excuse to drag my feet and pretend that there was something actually wrong with the contract that wasn't wrong with it. And then he lies in the video and he claims that someone asked me about the contract. And then I said, no, I'm the one that revealed there was a contract. They were keeping it private. And I thought that keeping, publicly revealing everything is always the best. I'll show the full first contract that was sent as well. I ended up taking a screenshot of it. He said the screenshot contradicted me. It didn't contradict me at all, though. Because this just shows you how much of a liar McToon is. I will quickly explain what he's saying, that the screenshot contradicted me, but it didn't. What I said is, look, there are parts in here that would have to be litigated, right? And it's a subjective, arbitrary determination of what is or isn't reasonable, or whatever the term was. And I'm like, who determines? This was back and forth with him constantly deflecting, obfuscating, misrepresenting, lying. He just projects that I'm a liar. He's projecting that he's incessantly lying. I'm like, this would require litigation, right? So basically, unless it's specifically detailed as a justifiable exemption, then if he got angry, which, by the way, when someone randomly is out of $45,000 or $90,000, there's no way to predict their behavior. People become erratic and angry, and he could try to come after me after the money. And if it wasn't a specific exemption that was listed, and it just has to be like reasonable or whatever, it doesn't even say it has to be a reasonable excuse, like a reasonable person, that whatever it was. it would require litigation. And that's why when he said that it contradicted me, and I was like, no, it didn't. And like, who would determine what is reasonable? And he stopped responding because he's a liar. He lies about everything. I won't be as kind as Jonathan is about him. I have a history of this guy slander me, talked about how my children should be taken away from me because I think the earth is flat. And if they may hear that position, that my children should be taken from me, talked crazy about my wife, incessantly slandered and lied about me for years. That's why I have him blocked and don't talk to him. And so he's basically stalked me and tracked me down into the Discord, running on yet again another lie, a narrative that I was lying about having an attorney and none of it's real. And he offered to pay for five hours. And I just thought it was kind of stupid. And I just forget that McToon exists. It's like regularly I forget he exists. And then, long story short, he said send the invoice to his email, and he was going to pay for 5 hours of billable hours on the hourly rate. Then he got the invoice in the email and immediately moved the goalposts. He brags in this video about how easy it is. Just send the email. Just send the email. That should be super easy. He got the email and then said, have him send it to this physical address. So anyway, that's the story. So, people should be holding this guy accountable. I think it's all goofy, and that's more attention than I wanted to give it. But, I think it is, it does elucidate the point here, right? Which is that he's literally saying I'm lying in this video, claiming that I'm really adept at lying, claims I'm always lying, and I'm not lying about anything. And yet he's lying and claimed if he receives the official invoice in the email, he'd pay it. And he already moved it over to he needs it to be mailed, and I'm sure he'll try to find some other excuse or whatever. So cool. That's the update. And that's more than I want to give him attention-wise. But shout out again to Jonathan. That's my homie, man. And me and him vibe, and I resonate with him a lot. And yeah, we have very aligned principles, and I have a lot of respect for anyone that will put themselves out on the limb that's less popular but is right, and standing up for quote unquote fringe subjects or certainly biblical cosmology or people being censored by the government because they have the bravery to speak about some of these ostracized subjects is admirable to me. And yeah, I think that's cool. And then we ate Shabbat dinner with his family, and we had an incredible conversation. It was very fun. It's very cool. And yeah, that's my brother basically. So that's how I feel. And now you guys have met him. Now you guys know him. All kinds of lies in those comment sections, like you can't know who someone represents. That's attorney-client privilege. It's like, what? Do you not realize that court documents are publicly on a docket? So whoever you have as an attorney is going to be known they represented you. Not to mention Alex Stein is the one who told me who his attorney was anyway. So it's all goofy, but cool. We're going to wrap this up now. So I love you guys. I did try a new stream out, so it actually went away from the originally scheduled stream, but we'll figure all that out. Hopefully everything was good quality-wise. And I hope you guys enjoy the stream. I will have a stream soon. All kinds of announcements. I won't let them all go, but the new website's pretty much done. People are still being canceled on Kofi because I started talking about some of these subjects, and all of a sudden third parties started attacking my payment processing, and you guys know that ended a lot of my subscriptions. If you get canceled on Kofi, you can move over to the website, and you should be able to sign up for a membership there. The stream should be going to that website. So basically, I'll be streaming natively. So all my streams, no matter if they're quote unquote censored or not, they'll always reliably be there. And so that's cool. That's a nice improvement and update. It's kind of expensive to do it, but I'm going to try to do it. I think it'll all work out. I think people will rally around to make it possible, and we'll see. So there should be a chat there. There should be native streams there, and so that's a bit of the update. We'll keep some more of that coming. We're supposed to have like a pretty intense debate, very different opinions. Brother Nathaniel, Dustin Nemos are supposedly going to be debating. They asked me to moderate, so hopefully we can set that up because I think debate's always good, no matter what you think of what people's positions are. So that should be interesting, and yeah, I'll just keep you guys updated outside of that. So, cool. All right. I think that's it. And quickly check again. Here's $20 so you can put some mittens on at the South Pole. Thanks, man. Thanks, man. Super fluidity of naughtiness. All of our everything is supposed to be paid for, though. All of our equipment and clothing and travel and food and all that. It's in the contract. and what specifically everything he said that said verbally is legally binding according to his own signature. So cool. I love you guys. I'm just gonna try to end the stream with my song again. This is a new platform that I'm using, but seek and speak truth unequivocally. The weak find contentment in the consensus of ignorance. So who cares what other people think? And what's true is rarely popular. What's popular is rarely true. And rejoice when they revile you for his name's sake, or for the truth's sake, because they did it to all the prophets before you. Peace.
That's for Israel. Wonder is it real? Rappers act and say they high, say they sipping pills. Glorify suicide so they get the deals. Big pharma set it up, had to flip the pills. Control the music industry until the scripts get filled. Geopolitically, yeah, we in the field. That's for Israel. Wonder is it real? Took the way you saw the world, then distorted it. Now you think you wanna rock that twirl somewhere orbiting. Theories disproportionate, the truth distorted quick with a forceful grip. They force a misinfo that we absorbing quick. Took the people's signature that mean extorted it. They forging it. If news ain't good informants who informing them, there's a surplus, but they tell us there are shortages. Credit economy mortgages, dollar that's supported with empty fortresses. But what's important is this: we courting ships, important gifts. Of course it is, what extortion is in accordance with an assortment list of foreign tricks. We ignoring which informant this, informant this. It looked like we were snoring tricked. Pedophilia and the government endorsing it. Yeah, eugenics is exactly what abortion is. You just vilify those insubordinate. Way to matrix engineer, that's unfortunate. Geopolitically, we in a field. That's for Israel. Wonder is it real? Rappers act and say they high, say they sipple pills. Glorify suicide so they get the deals. Big pharma set it up just to flip the pills. Control the music industry until the scripts get filled. Geopolitically, yeah, we in a field. That's for Israel.